300-pound dudes tackling you on a frozen field, the last thing you want to do is stay out there. Believe me, the Rams players were thinking about the jacuzzi at their team hotel, that they find it laughable, but more laughable if they totally disregard the trade whatsoever. This guy has transformed the balance of power in the Eastern Conference. And you could argue the entire defense is going to be absolutely ferocious next year. But if your number one priority is to win a Super Bowl, then J.J. Watt is making a grave mistake. To ride this Chad Henne experiment for an entire game, I might need a whole bottle of Hennessy just to get through that. Guy who's won 8 division titles, who's made 5 AFC championship appearances, who's reached the Super Bowl 3 times and has won 2 Super Bowls for this organization. Aaron Rodgers has only won 1 Super Bowl with Green Bay. Drew Brees has only won 1 Super Bowl with New Orleans. There's only 13 quarterbacks in NFL history that have won multiple Super Bowls, and Big Ben is one of those individuals. And good morning, and welcome to Morning Joe right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. I'm Jonah Malkin with you every single Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Have a lot to discuss today. Some news in the NBA with Myers Leonard and Les Miles coming up at the end of the show in college football. And more importantly, some surprise gifts that keep on giving with Tampa Bay. You're not going to want to miss that. But we start, of course, could we start any other way than with the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, the news that went viral on Monday. Dallas and Dak Prescott have agreed to a deal. Finally, the wait is over. Dak Prescott inks a 4-year, $160 million deal, $120 million guaranteed to remain with the Dallas Cowboys. He signs the highest paid signing bonus for an NFL quarterback ever, $66 million. That surpasses Aaron Rodgers. That surpasses Russell Wilson. He's going to be collecting over $75 million in the first year alone. In fact, over the course of his first 3 seasons in Dallas, he's going to be making an average of $42 million. Finally, we have the news. We've been waiting. I've been waiting 2 years. It's crazy. It's already been 2 years, but 2 years have elapsed. And finally, we've got this news in Dallas, Texas. So for me, obviously Dak Prescott from a financial standpoint kind of helps the Dallas Cowboys out a little bit because he's only going to be accounting for $22 million in the cap this year. So normally if he was going to sign the franchise tag, it'd be $37 million. But because he signs this long-term deal, it actually ends up saving Dallas an additional $15 million. So when you look at Dak Prescott and you're trying to evaluate, okay, is this worth it? Is it not worth it? You first have to take a step back and say, well, what has he accomplished with Dallas so far? Well, we do know that he's thrown the most number of 400-yard passing games in Dallas Cowboys history with 7. He's rushed for over 24 touchdowns, which is the most by any Dallas Cowboys quarterback. He's second behind Tony Romo for the most 300-yard passing games as a Dallas Cowboy. And this is a guy in Dak Prescott who's actually led the Cowboys on 15 game-winning drives. This is a guy that has a 42-27 overall record as the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. And he's thrown for over 17,000 yards. And he's been phenomenal. He's been absolutely phenomenal with the Dallas Cowboys. And so 17,000 passing yards, 106 touchdowns, 40 interceptions, and yet the Cowboys haven't reached the Super Bowl and haven't won a Super Bowl in 25 years. Now, I know what we should be talking about. What we should be talking about is, should Dallas have given him this money? Should Jerry Jones have caved and acquiesced to Todd France's demands and to Dak's demands and given him this contract. And that's a completely valid argument. You're paying this guy this much money, this lucrative of a deal. Hell yeah, you're expecting at least an NFC championship appearance, if not a Super Bowl. I totally understand that. That is totally valid and legitimate. I don't want to focus on that today. Because the reality is, yes, this is a lucrative contract. And yes, if my mom gave me $500 to go buy groceries to make a meal for my family, to get a nice meal, I'm not going to Trader Joe's. If I go to Trader Joe's, I'm going to get shredded. My mom's not giving me $500 to go to Trader Joe's. I love Trader Joe's. Everyone loves Trader Joe's. Quality's great. The soundtrack is always on point. Produce, quality is fantastic. You give me $500 to go buy groceries, I'm going to Whole Foods. That's a Whole Foods type of trip. If I don't come back with a Whole Foods bag or a Bristol Farms bag, I'm getting absolutely torn to pieces. You're not going to Trader Joe's with $500 on your budget to buy groceries. You're not going to get fresh meat. Doesn't matter if it's boarhead quality, boarhead meats from a Ralph's. If I come back with a Ralph's bag, my mom's going to tear me to shreds. She's expecting me to go to a delicatessen, to go to a deli. But I don't want to focus on that today, because I just want to take a step back, take a deep breath, and just appreciate and relish this moment for Dak Prescott. That's what I want to do. I want to take a sauna in this story, because this is one of the most heartfelt stories that you can find. And it's easy to quickly move on to the next following question, which is, well, what should the expectations be? And they're all valid and legitimate. But let's take a step and just treasure this moment and enjoy this moment for a man that has had to endure so much. Because for whatever reason, it's just felt like people have never fully embraced Dak Prescott. They've never wanted to wrap their arms around him. First, it was he was being scrutinized for expediting Tony Romo's retirement and taking over his job in 2016. That was the first complaint. Then it was, well, this is Zeke's team, and all the success is predicated on Ezekiel Elliott. And the only reason why Dak has had any success is because of the run game by Ezekiel Elliott. Then there was the impasse with the contract with Jerry Jones and his agent, Todd France, and they were at a grid. There was a gridlock that was existing between the two of them. And Jerry Jones was trying to divide the fan base. Who should you root for? Who should you support in this instance? And then Dak is forced to sign the franchise tag. He bets on himself, and he suffers a gruesome, devastating, potentially career-ending injury, shattering his ankle. And instead of taking the moment to console the guy, we're already devaluing his impact as the starting quarterback and saying, oh, well, a guy in Andy Dalton can probably come in and do an admirable job. And what we saw is that whole situation blew up last year. Dallas was horrendous. And what it highlighted was that Dak Prescott was, in fact, the linchpin that has kept this Dallas Cowboys team afloat. That's what it showed. And so he's had to endure so much. He's lost loved ones. He obviously shattered his ankle. He's had to battle his way to get to this point. This is a quarterback who didn't go to a Power 5. I mean, he went to a Power 5 school, but he didn't go to one of the elite Power 5 schools in the SEC. He went to Mississippi State. He was selected in the 4th round. Over the course of his first 4 years in the NFL, he accumulated $3.6 million. He didn't actually make over $1 million till his 4th year in the league, his 4th year as a starter, in which he had already led the Cowboys to the playoffs twice. In fact, his rookie year, he led them to a 13-3 record, the best record in the NFC. And he's proven he'd collected a win for the Cowboys. He'd won the NFC East twice in his first 4 years, and he hadn't made anything over those 4 years. So let's just take this time to celebrate the individual for collecting what was rightfully deserved, because he's paid his dues. There's no question about it. And Dak Prescott is the consummate professional. If you're the Dallas Cowboys, you could not have hoped to have a better individual represent your organization. Consummate professional. He carries himself well in front of the media. He's a tremendous emblem of your organization. He's a leader. He galvanizes troops. He galvanizes his players. They want to run through brick walls for him. And he inspires and motivates. And that's what you need. Is you don't need someone who's going to bring along controversy and distractions. Someone who's going to go to work every single day and just go out and do his job. And that's what he does. And so when you see the emotions overflowing and you see that embrace that he has with his brother, it just touches your heart, because not only did he just receive generational wealth to set him and his family's kids and his family's kids, just generations of wealth for his entire family, but you see the hard work that he put in. So today, I don't want to be talking about, well, is Dak Prescott really worth this contract? Should he be the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL behind Patrick Mahomes? No. Should he be making more money than Deshaun Watson, than Aaron Rodgers, than Russell Wilson? No, he shouldn't be. I'm not denying that at all. Should he really have been the one to receive the largest signing bonus in NFL history for a quarterback at $66 million? No. But I don't care. Not today. I don't care. Not today. Because, again, ability, the best ability is availability. And outside of this past year, he had been one of the most durable quarterbacks. He had played and started in all 69 games that he'd played. That's the reality. And I understand he just missed the last season, but he was on pace to have a tremendous offensive year, and he shattered his ankle. And that's the first setback for him. So Jerry Jones may have won the battle, but Dak Prescott won the war. And again, I know all the deluge of questions and expectations, the enormous expectations that are going to be heaped onto Dak Prescott. I understand that. And there will be a time and place for that. And those conversations and discussions should be had. But right now is not that time to be explicating and dissecting this contract and calling into question whether or not he's deserving of it. Let's just enjoy this sports story and appreciate a story of a guy that's had to overcome so much to reach this point. That's ultimately what we should be focusing on. Now, transitioning to teams that have experienced some success and are still reaping the rewards from that success, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the rich just keep getting richer. Lavonte David just announced yesterday that he is returning to Tampa Bay, signed a 2-year, $25 million deal to remain with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The 31-year-old inside linebacker has blossomed into one of the best inside linebackers in the NFL. $20 million guaranteed. He's been named the captain all 7 years that he's been there. Think about that. Lavonte David has been named the captain of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the past 7 years that he's been in the NFL. He's coming back. Chris Godwin just accepted the franchise tag for about $16.43 million to remain in Tampa Bay at least one more year. This is a guy who finished second on the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards with 840 receiving yards, in receiving touchdowns with 7 receiving touchdowns. And what's beautiful about this is a guy in Chris Godwin clearly easily could have signed anywhere else. You take a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, for example, that have the third highest and most cap space to sign someone. He easily could have decided to sign with or decline the franchise tag, go sign with Jacksonville Jaguars. You know that they're going to bring in Trevor Lawrence, and you could probably secure more long-term commitment there, more guaranteed money, and still get a bunch of offensive weapons and be the number one featured guy in Jacksonville. But he decided to stay in Tampa Bay and return for one more year. And this is what leads to the ultimate conclusion, which is the Tom Brady effect. This is the Tom Brady effect. And we know that when it comes to football, the quarterback position is the most lucrative position in football. And we know that Tom Brady has had this proclivity to rework contracts and sign team-friendly deals. And that is one element that has enticed players to come. Is because it's created more cap space for other players to earn more money. So it drives up this incentive to come play for him. But the biggest impetus for guys wanting to sign with Tom Brady, essentially, is because he wins. And it shows that the winning culture is ultimately the biggest selling point when it comes to players. And that winning, above all else, is the major selling point. I talked about on Monday how recruiting has shifted so much. And how when you're recruiting, obviously, it's important if you've got pre-existing relations or friendships with certain guys. That certainly can help increase the likelihood that you're going to sign somewhere. Because you've got a buddy there, there's no question that plays a role. But the biggest selling point now is what type of culture have you cultivated? And are you a winning organization? We saw with Blake Griffin. This is the reason why he signed with the Brooklyn Nets. It was not just that they had an abundance of talent. It's not just that their roster was filled with all-stars. It's because he saw that chemistry somehow fit together, and these pieces were actually working together and have now transformed the Brooklyn Nets into a contender and the leading favorite to come out of the East, if not win the NBA championship. That's what drew Blake Griffin to the Brooklyn Nets, was the potential for winning. It wasn't just that he had an existing relationship with DeAndre Jordan. They're wealthy. They've got off-season homes. They can go visit each other during the summer. They don't need to play with each other if they don't think they're going to win together. So today, Tom Brady is a 7-time Super Bowl champion, a 5-time Super Bowl MVP, 3-time NFL MVP. That is the selling point. Do you want to win a Super Bowl ring with me? Yes or no? If you want to win, come sign with me. Come play with me. Because I'm going to get you there. I'm going to take you to the promised land. He's the winningest quarterback, the winningest football player in NFL history. That's the selling point. It's not about, well, it's great that Tom Brady can rework his contract, which is something that I talked about on Monday. Because what reworking the contract illustrated wasn't just that he is trying to be a team player and that he doesn't necessarily want the money, but that winning is the priority. And I think that what we're seeing with guys like Lavonte David, who are returning, and even Chris Godwin, who can still sign a massive deal next year. This doesn't preclude him from being able to sign that massive long-term extension that he's seeking, because obviously Chris Godwin, he still wants to win. He still wants that long-term security, and he still wants that big payday. I get it. But the beautiful thing about this situation is those aren't mutually exclusive. He can still get his big payday and continue to win at least for one more season. And that is all sparked by Tom Brady. Every bit of that is sparked by Tom Brady. And not to mention now, they're setting themselves up in position to potentially re-sign Shaq Barrett, which is the last piece of that puzzle that they're trying to re-sign. And again, all of that is the Tom Brady effect. All of that is the Tom Brady effect, and we're seeing that into fruition. Day one, he shows up in Tampa Bay with the Buccaneers organization, an organization that hadn't won a Super Bowl since 2003. They were the losingest franchise in sports history. On day one, he wins a Super Bowl with that organization. Just impressive every single time. So the NFL just announced the new salary cap for every single team. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this too much. I'm not going to touch on this too much, but it is fascinating to see when you compare where we're at right now versus where we were a couple of years ago. And the NFL cap was now set last night to $182.5 million. Now, a lot of this is due to the lost revenue that the teams in the league weren't able to collect because of COVID-19. So you couldn't allow fans to return back into the stands, and there was a limited occupancy. So we know how much revenue is generated by fans showing up to the games. We know that. But it is interesting to look at where the cap has been over the last couple of years juxtaposed this year. So if you look at 2020, the salary cap was $198.2 million. That was just last year in 2020. In 2019, the cap was $188 million. In 2018, $177.2 million. So coming into this year, we are at $182.5 million. So a little dip. It certainly has shrunk and condensed a bit from where it was last year and even where it was in 2018. But I do think that it does two things. One, I think there's a strong likelihood that it will buoy again in the 2022 season because of the new TV contract and the new influx of cash that will be coming to the NFL and then allocated to all of the teams. But the second thing is it highlights why Dak Prescott and his agent were pushing so hard to sign this new contract, because this cap is smaller than it was last year. And last year, we know the deal that Jerry Jones made to Dak Prescott was a little bit less. It was about $175 million over the course of 5 years. So Dak Prescott was looking to collect as much as he could. And again, now that we've seen that this cap situation and the salary cap has decreased for every team, quarterbacks are going to account for much more of the percentage of your salary cap. So now you really have to choose wisely what types of guys you're going to sign to those massive deals and which guys you're going to let go. I'll touch on that at another time, but it is interesting just to see the ripple effect that it can have when you start looking at all these different teams and how the cap situation will impact them. Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitch TV, Twitter, and on YouTube Mondays and Wednesday mornings, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Twitter, YouTube, Facebook Live. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube. Follow on Twitter at Jonah-Malkin or at morning_Joe_ on Twitter. This was a disturbing story that, again, I'm not going to expand or expound upon too much just because it hits home personally for me. Myers Leonard used an anti-Semitic slur while he was live streaming his video game Call of Duty last night. The Heat just announced that he will be away from the team indefinitely as the NBA investigates and probes into the video. And it just amazes me how uneducated people still are, how ignorant and uneducated people still are. And it amazes me how these forms of hate speech and bigotry continue to exist and persist in our society. And obviously, as someone who is Jewish myself, it obviously hits home in a different way. And it's absolutely disgusting. It's abhorrent, and it's very disturbing and upsetting and frustrating. But what's really frustrating about it is more so the platform that he has, the following that he has. Now, this shouldn't be permitted anywhere, but especially when you are a professional athlete that has such a big following and you're live streaming onto Twitch, you know at least thousands, if not millions of people are going to be following and listening to your live stream. Now, granted, I understand that he was playing a really violent video game that's supposed to simulate war. So naturally, you're going to kind of let your guard down. You're going to be a lot more raw, a lot more unhinged, a lot more uncensored. And I understand that aspect of things. But to just not be aware of the broad impact it may have on communities everywhere, it's just an abhorrent gesture. And what makes it worse is the fact that the president and the owner of the Miami Heat, Mickey Arison, is a Jewish guy. Mickey Arison, his parents are both Jewish. He was born in Tel Aviv, in Israel. So the guy who's employing you, who's paying you in excess of $10 million, or I think in the $9 million, that's the guy that you just directly insulted. So that's to make matters worse, is your owner of the Miami Heat who's giving you a job, you're directly insulting his religion. And there's no place for it. And I'm glad that some of these companies that were sponsoring him from the live streaming, I forget the names of some of the companies, they've dropped him as clients. And hopefully he can learn from this. We obviously saw Deshaun Jackson make those comments and reference the quote from Hitler. And so if you're listening or watching Myers Leonard, just be better. Be better than that. And that's all I'm going to say on that matter. Okay. I want to transition now as we're sticking with the NBA, and we're about to start the second half of the NBA season tomorrow, which is really exciting. A number of great games that are going to be played. Golden State and the Clippers. We've got the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks that are going to be playing tomorrow. So I'm excited that the NBA is coming back. And so gave me an opportunity to take a step back and say, okay, which teams to me have been the most surprising teams in the NBA? What team's been the most surprising team in the NBA? Now, I know that there's an obvious choice. The New York Knicks are the obvious choice. But to me, in a weird way that I'm going to explain, they're not the biggest surprise in the NBA to me. The biggest surprise in the NBA to me so far has been the Charlotte Hornets. Right now, they're 17-18 in the Eastern Conference. They're the 7th seed in the Eastern Conference. But more importantly, all the other teams that are in the playoff picture in the Eastern Conference, they were either contenders in the playoffs last year, or they're a relevant and noteworthy franchise. So the 76ers, big surprise. They're the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. But they've always had that star power with Joel Embiid, that dynamic duo with Embiid and Simmons and Tobias Harris, and now with the addition of their new head coach, Doc Rivers. This was a team that already was competing last year and already had an abundance of talent coming into this year, and they've still retained that. So they've just surpassed perhaps our expectations of being a top 4 seed to the number 1 overall seed, but they've always been talented. The Brooklyn Nets have always had perhaps the most talented roster in the NBA. And that was even before they traded for James Harden, or even before they were prepared to sign Blake Griffin. So the Brooklyn Nets, sure, we may have not expected their chemistry to click right from the get-go, as it has, but there's no question, no denying the talent that's existed there. Then you look at the Bucks, the Celtics, the Miami Heat, the Toronto Raptors. These are all teams that were in the playoffs last year. Now, the Knicks are another choice. There's no question about it. They're a major surprise team, and they've been a moribund franchise for the last several years. They haven't won an NBA championship since 1973. They haven't made the postseason in over 8 seasons, but they've still been the New York Knicks, and New York is a relevant market and a relevant destination. So New York, again, whether for the right reasons or the wrong reasons, they've still remained in the news. But the Charlotte Hornets, we've never discussed the Charlotte Hornets. The only reason why we even discussed the Charlotte Hornets is because of Michael Jordan, who was the owner, who retired over 20 years ago. That's the only reason we even talk about the Charlotte Hornets. The last time we really talked about the Charlotte Hornets was during that brief stint with Kemba Walker when he first entered the league, and they made the postseason 2 times in the 2013-2014 season and the 2015 and the 2016 season. 2015 to the 2016 season. Outside of that, we've never discussed the Charlotte Hornets. Not a single time. And now we're finally getting a chance to see a Charlotte Hornets team that are young, they're fun to watch, they're exciting, they play hard, they rarely get blown out. The only game I can really think of where they got blown out was against the Utah Jazz in the middle of one of their 2 10-game winning streaks. Outside of that, this is a team that's overachieved, and really with one quality veteran in Gordon Hayward. Outside of Gordon Hayward, this is a young, maturing roster. And LaMelo Ball has been a revelation, if not starting to blossom into a star. This is a guy who not only is the front runner to win Rookie of the Year for the season, he started coming off the bench. Now he's a permanent starter. He's been averaging 16 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, 45% shooting, 38% shooting from the three-point line, 80% from the free throw line. But in the month of February, 20 points a game, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, still the same 45% shooting from the floor, 41% from the three-point line for a guy who we all claimed could not shoot entering the NBA. 86% from the free throw line. This guy has taken monumental steps as this season has progressed. And right now, they're right in the thick of things. They're in the 7th seed. They're in the 7th spot right now in the Eastern Conference. And he's got the 2nd highest PER on the team behind Gordon Hayward. Do I think they're going to make the playoffs? I'm not sure. I know that they'll be in the play-in tournament, but whether they will end up finishing as one of those top 8 teams, I'm not sure. But up to this point in the season, they've been nothing short of magical. I mean, this really is one of those stories where you just have a team kind of sprout out of nowhere and take over the league by storm. They've absolutely taken over the league by storm, and I'm extremely impressed with the Charlotte Hornets up to this point. They've been my biggest surprise team. Now, flipping over the script from surprise team to which team in the NBA I think is going to make the biggest jump in the second half of the season, again, because the second half commences tomorrow, I'm going with the Atlanta Hawks. Now, this, I will admit, partially biased because I picked the Atlanta Hawks to make the postseason at the beginning of this year. So there's a little bit of self-serving here, kind of self-altruism going here. But I will admit that I do think for a bevy of reasons, the Atlanta Hawks are actually primed to make this big leap in the second half of the season, and here's why. First of all, they've got a top 10 easiest schedule remaining in the second half of the season. They had one of the hardest stretches of basketball to start the year, and that's going to ease up a little bit in the second half of the season. And this is a team that had closed out their final 9 games going 5-4, despite going through all this turmoil and situations with their head coach. They fired Lloyd Pierce, and Nate McMillan has come in as the interim head coach prior to the final 9 games of the season, first half of the season prior to the All-Star break. This is a team that had gone 2-7. They had lost 7 of their previous 9 games prior to this latest stretch of 9 games. And then going into the All-Star break, they've won 2 straight games. And they've got an easy schedule through their first 4 or 5 games right out of the gates to start. I think that can start to get some momentum, develop some momentum in winning for the Atlanta Hawks. And I just think that, again, after you fire a head coach midseason, there's normally this spark. It's like you got this you're reignited to play better, to play harder for your new coach and Nate McMillan. And we know that he's a good coach given the jobs that he's done with the Indiana Pacers and the Portland Trail Blazers and the Seattle Supersonics. So that's what I'm expecting. Again, they're the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference right now, but they're going to be much healthier. Rajon Rondo is coming back. The entire team, Cam Reddish, will be healthier, and they will have their entire squad for this second half push is what I'm expecting. Not to mention, when you look at some of the teams ahead of them, the New York Knicks, sure, they're entrenched in the 5th spot right now in the Eastern Conference, but they've had the 5th easiest schedule up to this point, and they've got the 5th hardest schedule remaining on their way to closing out the season. So I expect them to slide down the rankings a little bit. Again, they've been a tremendous story, one of the most surprising teams in the NBA. There's no question about it, if not the most surprising team, although I went with the Charlotte Hornets. But they've had the 5th easiest schedule. So I expect them to slide a little bit. And then one of the teams right ahead of them, the Chicago Bulls, I love me some Zach LaVine. I'm thrilled that he got paid. I'm thrilled that he was an all-star. And he's having a tremendous, efficient season. But the reality is the Chicago Bulls have the 6th hardest schedule remaining in the second half of the season. So I expect them to slide. The Toronto Raptors have the 8th hardest schedule remaining in the NBA. So I think there are a lot of opportunities for the Atlanta Hawks to make a jump and surpass some of these teams right now that are ahead of them. Again, the Charlotte Hornets, I don't know if they're going to be able to hold on to that spot. It's not like they have the most difficult schedule remaining. It's about an average, middle of the pack, difficult schedule. But I do see the Atlanta Hawks making that jump. Again, it's partially biased. I'm expecting them to make, and I projected them to make the postseason, so we'll see if that happens. But up to now, that's who I am going for. Again, Morning Joe right here, J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Okay, one more kind of hard-hitting story that, again, I don't love to dwell on, but we have to talk about it. Les Miles was just released. He and the Kansas Jayhawks football program, they have mutually parted ways, is what the report is saying. That was announced on Friday, or late Monday evening. They announced that they mutually parted ways. On Friday, there was a second report conducted by the Hush Blackwell law firm that detailed just systemic failures by LSU to report some of these allegations. And so Les Miles was released due to alleged inappropriate behavior with some female students on campus. And apparently, part of the report of the kind of the sexual misconduct and abuse that he's accused of, apparently part of that report showed that the former LSU athletic director, Joe Oliva, recommended in 2013 that Miles be fired as the head coach because of these accusations. Now, Les Miles, a 67-year-old head coach, he was already struggling at Kansas. 3-18 in 2 seasons with the Jayhawks. 0-9 with Kansas in 2020. In fact, their only win in the Big 12 came in 2019 over Texas Tech. So this is a guy who has struggled. He still has $8 million and 3 years left on the deal, although they agreed to settle for $1.9 million. But I'm not going to classify him with some of these other individuals because, again, this is an accusation and we're still waiting for more information to come out and for this story to develop. But you look at the past with Jerry Sandusky in Penn State. He wasn't the one who committed those acts, but he covered them up for years, which was abhorrent. You've got Art Briles, the former head coach at Baylor, whose players committed sexual misconduct and abuse. Obviously, with Urban Meyer. Now, because he's been such a winning coach everywhere he's gone, he is somehow still the head coach for the Jacksonville Jaguars going into this year, the NFL team. And that's obviously to a lesser degree. And then we've got the most punitive example, which is Larry Nassar, the former gymnastics coach at Michigan State. And I don't need to rehash what he did. So this is an accusation, so I don't want to totally unleash and unload on Les Miles today because we're still awaiting more information to come out. But already this appears to be just a disgusting unfolding story. And the optics of it are terrible. We talk about optics all the time. And unfortunately, not unfortunately, but when you're accused of something like this in today's era, that's a cardinal sin. There's no real recovering from that. And Les Miles, listen, he has won everywhere he's gone. This is a guy who, for his career, is 218 and 145 as a head coach, a 66%. He's won 66% of his games. At LSU, he won 77% of his games in 12 years, 148 and 114. So he has won where he's gone. But again, the optics are really bad. And this report didn't just come out of thin air. This wasn't fabricated. This wasn't manufactured. There were rumblings about this in 2013. And whenever there's smoke, there's typically fire. And so I am not going to totally tear him apart today until more information comes out and the story continues to develop. But right now, this is just a disgusting, terrible look. And I'm not surprised that reports like this have come out. I'm sure there are other examples like this that have existed at different organizations for different programs for years that haven't been reported. So at this moment in time, I'm still waiting for more information to come out and for the story to develop. But as we sit here today, there is no tolerance for this type of behavior. And that's why Les Miles was canned. And Kansas did everything they could as quickly as they could to get rid of him. Again, his lawyer has vehemently disagreed, and he's entitled to do that. But at this moment in time, not a great look. Not a great look if you're Les Miles. Now, again, Urban Meyer was able to kind of survive, as it were, because he wasn't the accused. But there's no question that it wasn't the best look. Jonah Malkin right here on J&J Media Network, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on YouTube. Malkin's Moments. My Malkin's Moments are coming up. And there are a number of Malkin's Moments that I'm going to turn to today. And the first one is that Novak Djokovic in tennis just broke Roger Federer's all-time record for the most weeks ranked number one in the world. Yes, we are watching one of the three pillars of the sports world in tennis just break another long record that we thought was going to remain forever. Novak Djokovic now currently holds the top spot. He's been the number one ranked player in the world for 311 weeks. 311 weeks, which is just remarkable. And he was guaranteed this number after he won his 9th Australian Open, his 18th Grand Slam at the Australian Open. Just a fantastic story for a guy that's continuing to climb the mountain. He's still chasing Federer and Nadal that have shared the most number of Grand Slam titles with 20. So he's en route to that. But he also just finished the season as the world number one for the 6th time in his career, tying Pete Sampras for that mark for the most of all time. Okay, these last two, I'm pulling up videos here because these involve two athletes that have gifted their parents or family members cars as presents. And this is another one of these just tremendous examples that I just love to see, that we love to see. So I'm pulling up a video of, first it's Chase Young, who surprised his parents with a new car. And that just seems to kind of be the trend. And let's take a look at this video right here. So it's about to come up. We'll play it. We'll play it in just a second. Seems to be a little advertisement along the way. So, but again, I just love these types of stories. And so let's take a look right here. This video, Chase Young, number one. If it will play. That's just great. Gotta love the natural reactions that have come. So that was one. And then the other one actually involves another athlete in a different sport. In the NBA, we saw Ben Simmons. If you haven't checked it out, his brother, it was his birthday just the other day, and he surprised him with a new car, which again was just a tremendous gesture. And listen, a lot of these guys are making ridiculous amounts of money, absurd amounts of money. So I appreciate and commend them for making these gestures. I'm just waiting for the video to pull up right here. And if it does, oh, it's here. Okay. So now let's take a look at this second video right here. Ben Simmons giving his brother a new car. Check this one out. Here we go. That's just part of the video. The rest of it's great as well. And again, this just kind of warms my heart seeing a story like that, and the raw reaction to it is ultimately what makes it that much more special. So that's all the time that I got for you today. Thank you so much for joining me every Monday and Wednesday morning, 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11 Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. Morning Joe right here on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook Live. And I got a special guest that is going to be coming on the show next Wednesday. Mark your calendars. I got an exclusive special guest coming for next Wednesday's show. You're not going to want to miss it. Obviously, Mondays is going to be fantastic as well, but especially next Wednesday, you're not going to want to miss it. So thank you so much again for joining me. And as always, have a lovely rest of your morning.